All right, so we are
Oh,
started.
there it is. It's a little bit of a delay, but let me turn up my phone here
All
real
right,
quick.
so we are
Oh,
started.
there it is. Oh yeah, you can hear both audios.
Perfect. Perfect. That's awesome. So yeah, actually it looks like we are good to go then. And there is going to be there's going to be about a 45-second delay, I think is what they said, based on you and I talking sort of in real time.
I
Uh
can still now. I think you might have to turn yours down because I could.
are you there?
Okay, you know what? I got to close the YouTube thing because I'm seeing. Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
I've got to close this YouTube window.
No
All right, are
problem.
you there?
Yeah, no
Yeah, I had to
problem.
close. I had to close the YouTube window because what was happening was I had it up on the laptop and I was I forgot to turn the volume off, so I was hearing like that delay. So
Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah, no, as long as everybody can hear us, I think we're good. It is weird because I've got it up on another window and yeah, you can totally see the delay. But that's all right. We will make do.
I like how you got the logo up there as well.
Yeah, I tried. I tried to make sure that we're branding is very important when you do these things, so I wanted to make sure we got some good branding going on.
Absolutely. Let me see if I can open up the YouTube window again, and this time turn the. There's got to be a way to mute that. So just bear with me for a second here. There's got to be a way to mute it. Um, okay, I've muted it on my end. So I want to be able to see the chat window.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm gonna just fire off a real quick test in the chat here to make sure the chat is working.
Yeah, let me see if I can do that here. Okay. All right, we're up and running.
Let me fix the chat widget here.
What do you think? There's about a 1 minute delay.
The documentation I saw said it was about. Oh, yep, there we go. And so our little widget on the screen also will pop up the chat so that uh, everybody that's watching it on like mobile or that will be able to see it without
Oh, okay.
having to actually go into the chat. So
Oh, awesome.
um,
Awesome.
the documentation I found said it's about a 45-second delay, which shouldn't be a problem for everybody listening because they'll just, fire off questions. It would be a little more difficult if we were trying to take like actual like phone calls or something. That would be
Right.
a little more difficult. But this is mostly just a test. So we'll see
Yeah,
if
a
it.
little dry run to see exactly what we can pull off there. You
Yep.
got to tell me what's behind you there because this is the first time I've seen you.
Um,
This
Yeah, and ignore my quarantine beard. Um,
I think I've got one too. Trust me.
so this is just a bookshelf of a bunch of my like comic book action figures and statues and stuff like that. I basically this is my office is like my overgrown toy room essentially. I've got all my movies over here to the right. I got all my Star Wars figures and stuff over here, and then all my comic book ones are behind me.
Oh, that's awesome. So what's work like today? I mean,
Uh,
what's the situation going on?
Work was fine today up until about 4:30, and then they actually like I got an email to do a warrant request that ended up getting rejected. So now I actually have to work a little bit during the weekend, which is it is what it is. Such is life.
Define for me a warrant request as somebody who's not in law enforcement like yourself.
Sure. So when an officer wants to do something, get some information that requires a search warrant, whether it's in this particular case, it was getting phone records. So they'll write up a warrant. They send it to me to review it to make sure that it has enough of what we think is probable cause to say, hey, these phone records are important to this case. So, judge, give us the warrant so that we can demand them from the phone company.
Okay.
And you write up the warrant that outlines all the reasons why you think they're important. And most of the time, it's pretty straightforward. But then every once in a while, you think you've got it. The judge doesn't see eye to eye with you, and they reject it. So then you have to go back and figure out what are the magical words they're looking for to get them to approve it so that you can get what you need out of it.
Gotcha. Okay. Now, before we really jump into this conversation, I have to ask you, excuse me, have you been watching Tiger King at all yet?
I have not. I've seen everybody going crazy for it, but I haven't actually watched it yet. Have you started watching it?
I've watched the first episode, and I can tell you right now, it's 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 as advertised. I mean, it's batshit crazy. It really is.
Yeah, that's kind of what I figured. I'm not sure. I don't know. It's tough. I'm not sure that it's the kind of show that I necessarily want to watch, but I don't know. We stay cooped up in the house much longer. I'll get to where I'm going to be willing to watch anything.
Well, Ozark. Oh, okay. Hold on. Someone just chimed in here.
Oh, look at that! It's my buddy Jeff.
All right, Jeff, how are you? Nice. Thanks for joining us tonight. This is our trial run. We're just trying to kind of work out the kinks and see if we're going to be able to do this on a regular basis. So, welcome.
And I will give Jeff a shout out. He has his own podcast, Two Strike Noise. It's a fantastic baseball history podcast. If people, there's probably not a ton of crossover between our audiences, but if there is, if you're a baseball fan, I highly encourage people to check it out. It's a fantastic podcast.
And Jeff, feel free to drop a link to the podcast in the chat there. And, he says here, I've got a question ready to go. All right, fire away, Jeff.
Dead air. Get with it, Paulson.
Let's see. You get to remake. Okay, I'll read the question. You get to remake one movie, any movie, and you get to recast it. Who is in it and who are the leads? Mike, I'm going to defer that to you first because I need a little time to think about that.
Remake any movie, and I get to recast it. So I'm generally of the opinion that bad movies are much better to remake than good movies. So I'm trying to think of a movie that was almost there. I'm going to look over at my shelves and see if there's a movie that works in a way. You know what? I can think of one just kind of right off the top of my head, which is a couple of years ago, Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. Fascinating movie to watch. Great special effects. Badly miscast. And so I would remake that movie to be a little more straightforward, and I would recast it with Chris Evans and Evangeline Lilly as the leads. That's the best I got off the top of my head.
Well, let's see. We had another question in here. Ruben Steff said, have you ever had a near religious experience or something equivalent watching a film? What was the scene in film? Gosh, that's a great question right there. Yeah, that's happened to me a few times. I'm just trying to think out, just on the fly right now. Believe it or not, I believe I had a similar reaction like that, obviously, in The Dark Knight. I think that movie just spoke to me on a completely different level. And that entire chase scene through the streets of Chicago was just mind-blowing. Now, that's like a fun action movie type thing, but if I was to think about something a little more serious, I'd have to give it a little more consideration. Mike, what do you got?
So I actually I just recorded an episode with a friend of the program, Colin Woodward, and I actually brought this up. So the closest I can come up with is the first time I saw Fellowship of the Ring. And the reason for that is it was the end of and Jeff might even remember this because he was my roommate at the time. Daniel, I see your question. We'll get to you in just a sec. It was the end of my first semester in law school, and right as soon as I got done with my very last test, I started getting sick. It was like my body had been holding it together through finals, but as soon as my last final was done, everything just hit me. I ended up getting a fever and a sore throat, and I already had tickets to the midnight premiere of Fellowship because this is back when they did midnight premieres. And so I sat at home feeling like crap and debating on whether or not to go. And I was like, you know what? I'm gonna suck it up and go because I'm gonna feel like shit whether I'm home or whether I'm in the movie theater. In hindsight, probably shouldn't have gone given the reason we're all quarantined now. I shouldn't have infected everybody around me. But nonetheless, sitting there at midnight with a bunch of diehard Lord of the Ring fans watching this movie that we never even could have conceived ever seeing in our lifetimes while slightly feverish was one of my all-time favorite movie-going experiences. It was absolutely phenomenal.
Well, I'm going to say, and this is going to be, I don't know. I've only seen 45 minutes of the first Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Rings, and I have not seen the other two. And I know that's blasphemy for most people that are going to be listening and watching, but
it's blasphemy
that is
for
the reality.
Me, man. Like it's a good thing you live in Florida because otherwise we'd be having words.
So people always say, well, why did you leave the theater? I got up and walked out of the theater because I don't know. I think I was just very tired at the time, and I was sitting there saying to myself, well, Gandalf is just lighting off fireworks at a barbecue. Like, are we ever going to get to this? And it was at that moment that I was like, I'm going to go. And I promised myself that I would definitely, go back and revisit it. And I've got some time on my hands now, so I'm definitely thinking I will. And by the way, I just want to say a quick hello to Carmelita. Hello, welcome. My friend Paul, who lives up in Gainesville, just called me a heretic. Very well said, Paul. So welcome, guys. Mike, I'll let you do Daniel's question.
All right. And hi, Daniel. Glad you could join us. So Daniel has asked us one of his favorite topics. And for those who don't know Daniel, he's got a podcast as well. It's called Cobwebs. My boy Daniel is he's your gothic horror expert. If you have any questions on gothic horror, he is the guy to go to. And he's also just really into 1940s cinema, which is what he brought up. 1940s noir, favorite in the genre. For me, it's hands down Double Indemnity. I think it's the best noir movie ever made. I think every other noir movie is kind of playing catch up to that movie. How about you, Dana?
I'm going to defer again back to you. I just dropped my phone. That's how frustrated I am that I just don't know that genre very well. I really feel like I've got a good handle on the 70s, the 80s, 90s, 2000s, but my wheelhouse does not go back that far. But I'm always open for recommendations. And Mike, every time you've recommended something from that decade, I've always enjoyed it. So Daniel, I'll ask you, please fire off a recommendation for me. And what do we have here? Angie Rosario. Hey, babe, how are you? She says, hey, guys, thanks for taking the time to do the live chat. Daniel says, hell yeah, Double Indemnity is my favorite as well. Mike, how are we pronouncing the screen name? Soul's Wolf?
Soul's Wolf would be how I would pronounce it, and he's got a great story here about his movie experience. Do you want to...
So he said,
go ahead.
Yeah, he says, I went to the land of the dead a few hours after getting my wisdom teeth pulled. Then the medication kicked in, and I had to get carried out of the theater by my dad. That's awesome. Let's see. Oh, that's an interesting question. Angie says, Dana, we know Jaws is your favorite movie. Curious what your thoughts on what your thoughts of the sequels. Well, I think on the 20th Century Movie Club, I was pretty positive about Jaws 2, if you remember correctly, Mike.
Yeah, it was actually one of your first recommendations, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. The thing about when it comes to Jaws 3, I think Jaws 3 is one of the most watchable bad movies out there. It's one of those ones where I can sit down, and it's a quick 90-minute film. It's in and out, does its job, and I just think it's ridiculously bad. The effects, obviously, the effects were put together for 3D. It doesn't look good at all, but I can't stop I mean, I can't stop watching that film once it comes on. Jaws: The Revenge. Look, I saw that in the theater in 1987. I was a 9-year-old, terrified me then, but I have only seen it a handful of times since then, and I think it lives up to its moniker of just being a bad movie. That's so bad, it's just bad. Mike, what are your thoughts on the sequels?
Yeah, really quick. So Saul's Wolf is actually our friend Hollywood Ron from the Film Strip podcast. Hi, Ron.
Oh, okay. Hey, Ron.
Glad you could join us. I love Jaws 3D. It's a bad movie, but first of all, I am powerless against Dennis Quaid. You put Dennis Quaid in a movie, the movie's already playing on easy mode. I enjoy watching him so much as an actor. I think Jaws 4, the only thing that it's got going for it is the famous Michael Caine quote where he said, "I haven't seen the movie, but I have seen the house that the movie bought me." That's really all there is to say about Jaws 4, I think.
Okay. So, Paul Lytle asked the question, Dana, in your review of The Rise of Skywalker, you said it made you rethink The Last Jedi. Said I'd be very interested in hearing in what ways. And I know he's excuse me, I know he's interested in knowing because Paul and I were hanging out on Thanksgiving Day this year. We were at a little bar hanging out, and over the course of many beers and many hours, we were debating the merits of The Last Jedi. And he was very positive on the film. I was very negative on the film. So I understand why he's asking this question. I'm the best way for me to answer that, Paul, is although I don't agree with the decisions, a lot of the decisions that Rian Johnson made as far as moving the narrative forward in The Last Jedi, I at least respect that he created a coherent story that was easy to follow and understand, and it wasn't in a rush, and I thought it took its time, and I've reevaluated that film since seeing the Rise of Skywalker, and I've seen it probably 4 times since then, and I'll admit to enjoying it a little bit more, although I still will stick to my fundamental principles that I don't necessarily agree with the decisions that he made, but I respect that he made a coherent and straightforward narrative, unlike The Rise of Skywalker. Paul, I'm just going to ask you real quick. I haven't really talked to you in a little bit. Rise of Skywalker, thumbs up, thumbs down? So, well, we're waiting for Paul's answer. Go ahead with what Ron's got here.
Yeah, so Ron said he loves bad 3D movies. I think we all do, especially Friday the 13th 3 in 3D. But asked what our favorite 3D experience is, not counting Jaws 3D. So for me, I actually think some of the best 3D experiences I've had are the couple of Patrick Lussier films. I thought the remake, his and Todd Farmer, their remake of My Bloody Valentine was absolutely one of the most perfect 3D experiences I've ever had in my life. I also thought Drive Angry was right up there. And then also the Piranha, the Alexandre Aja Piranha 3D. These were movies that really steered into that kind of absurd 3D experience, very reminiscent of the Friday the 13th or Jaws 3D experience. Dana, how about you?
Well, for me, I'm going to defer to the most popular film in the world, or the highest grossing film in the world as well. It was. Look, say what you will about Avatar, but I saw it in IMAX 3D, and that was an incredible experience. Putting that one aside, very few films are really made with 3D cameras, and most of them are post-converted into 3D. So I will say that if I will do research on a film to find out if it was shot using 3D cameras. And having said that, I think one of the better 3D experiences I had was the third Transformers film, Dark of the Moon, which was shot using 3D cameras, and I thought it looked fantastic. And I'll say I think it's a pretty good movie, actually, in the realm of Transformers films.
That one's actually an interesting one because it did force Michael Bay to kind of calm down a little bit in his camera techniques. I actually am pretty pro the last half of that movie. I think the first half is pretty terrible, but I think once they get to Chicago, and the kind of the big battle in Chicago and everything, that's pretty hard to top. I mean, that's some pretty epic big scale filmmaking. So I think that's a good call. Because yeah, and I for once I could actually see what was going on in a Transformers movie
Yeah.
because it was 3D.
Excellent. So Paul says, when asked about Star Wars, he said, "It's Star Wars, so I enjoyed it, but I can't help but be disappointed in the choices that were made to end the Skywalker saga." I said this when we did our review of The Rise of Skywalker. I said it felt like J.J. Abrams was trying to do the Lord of the Rings trilogy all in one film. I just think there was. I've made the argument that I believe that it should have been a two-part movie. I think I think you might have been able to accomplish more that way. I agree with Paul. He also said that he hated that they made Rey a Palpatine. I still think the bolder and more fun choice was to have her as a nobody. I'm going to agree with that as well. I think that's a good one. Daniel says Avatar was an incredible 3D experience. Too many people have forgotten that. Well, don't worry, because in another year or so, we're going to be all ramped up on 5 or 6 Avatar sequels there, Daniel. So
I'll believe it when I see it.
yeah.
When one's actually in the theater, I will believe it. Ron just pointed out he saw My Bloody Valentine 3D on a date and was a big fan, but his favorite was Coraline. I have not. I have seen Coraline, but I did not see Coraline in 3D. But I can imagine that movie would have been absolutely beautiful in 3D. That's a perfect movie for that, especially as he points out they added depth of field, and that's actually one of my favorite things about 3D. As much as I enjoy the goofy stuff coming at the screen, they're the really beautiful ones. It's that depth of field that you get behind the screen that really makes it impressive. That's what separates sort of the new 3D from the old school, polarized red and green or glasses kind of 3D.
Paul says, "What do you guys think about the future of 3D considering its rocky past?" Well, what I think is interesting is I think 3D was Avatar, putting Avatar aside because that was revolutionary technology that Cameron introduced, and I'm very anxious to see what he's going to come up with these sequels. Maybe, like you said, 2 or 3 more years from now when we get them. Having said that, I think a lot of films really tried to cash in on the 3D gimmick, if you will, after Avatar. And it was just a way to, in my opinion, raise ticket prices and just get a couple, $3 extra a ticket. I mentioned that most of those movies were post-converted into 3D. It just doesn't work. Like, Mike, before I finish this, did you see when they put Jurassic Park or Star Wars The Phantom Menace in 3D? Did you go see those 3D conversions of those films?
I did. And yeah, there have been some very good post conversions. Pacific Rim was a post conversion, and I actually thought that was a fantastic 3D experience. But it takes a lot of time and money to do a proper post conversion, and like you said, I think you're right, Dana. They did quick and dirty post conversions so that they could get an extra $3 out of a ticket, and people eventually saw through that, which is why it's not the built-in extra money that it used to be.
Well, and I'll use this as an example. I used the last 3 Star Wars movies that came out with The Last Jedi, Solo, and The Rise of Skywalker. At my local Regal Cinema, which has an IMAX, they had both 3D and 2D screenings in their IMAX. And because I am just crazy about these type of things, would constantly every day look at the ticket availability for the 2D IMAX versus the 3D IMAX. And consistently, the 2D IMAX was outselling the 3D IMAX, which I think just goes to show that film aficionados will pay the extra money to see it in IMAX, but you don't have to wedge in the 3D. So, Paul, to finish up your question there, what do I think about the future of 3D? I think Cameron is working on, right now, 3D that doesn't require cameras. I know it's going to take a specific type of project. There's only like 2 theaters in the world right now that have these projectors. So I think that's going to be the future of 3D, and if anyone can pull it off, it's Cameron.
Yeah, I agree. We had a little bit of breakup there. Sorry, folks. There's probably going to be a few technical difficulties throughout this show because we're trying to learn how to do this. But I agree. I think the other thing is 3D is never really going to break through until they figure out a way to do it without people having to wear glasses. As long as we've got to wear the glasses, it's always going to limit, especially home. I have a 3D TV at home. I love it, but admittedly, the glasses aren't for everybody. And so I think once they figure out a way to do 3D without glasses, then we might see a change on stuff.
Now, I just got a text from Roy McMillan from the Moving the Needle podcast, an old friend of mine. We've been chit-chatting since the beginning of my podcast, How Was This Movie, back in 2013. He just texted me to say that, sorry, can't access the chat for some reason, but he wanted to mention that he saw IMAX 3D Jurassic Park. The humans looked like cardboard cutouts, but the dinosaurs looked amazing.
Yeah, that would be accurate. Ron just pointed out that Clash of the Titans was the cheapest post conversion. You could take your glasses off and put them back on, and that's he's right on that. That was a terrible post conversion, and literally the epitome of a cheap cash in, because they weren't even thinking 3D for that one. You know, some of the later ones, like I mentioned, Pacific Rim, even though that was a post conversion, Del Toro was thinking 3D from the start, and so a lot of the way the film was shot, the special effects, all of that stuff was done. But Clash of the Titans was terrible. It literally was just an extra couple of bucks that they were trying to get out of people.
Yeah, and what Ron just said, that's a true test. I mean, there's been 4 or 5 3D films that I saw where I just gently raise up my glasses for a moment, and there was you could tell that exactly what he just said, like they were only doing 3D, like in-depth, real 3D type of things when the action sequences were happening. So now I'm going to shift topics here just for a second while we're waiting on another question. Yesterday I had Adam Risky on the show, and we were talking about sort of the what's going to happen when the movie theaters open back up. And let's just play devil's advocate for a moment here, Mike, and say that the theaters open up unanimously on June 1st. Okay? Adam made the argument that, one of these smaller films that are going to come out, like the new Saw movie that's got Chris Rock in it, it would behoove them to just release that whatever day the theaters open back up, because, he says that everyone's going to be itching to get out of the theater. What do you think about that theory? Or do you think that the theater company or the studios are making the right decision just by setting hard dates for future releases?
I think it depends on the movie. Saw Spiral, if I recall.
From the Book of Saw.
Yes.
Which I haven't read yet.
That one might be a good one to just drop in the theater, because it's a low budget movie. It's a horror movie. Everybody knows horror movies have a chance to blow up big. It's probably, I can't imagine it's got more than a $10 million budget. That might be a good one. You can't really do that with something like Black Widow, because you can't take the risk that nobody's going to show up. And one thing I do think is people might be itching to go to the theaters, but they might also be a little apprehensive still. And so it might take a month before everybody's actually back into this idea of being out and being social. And so I don't know that I would want to be the one to drop a big budget movie on the day that the theaters open, June 1st or July 1st,
right,
whatever it may be. If you got a $5 million movie, you can take a genre movie that you can take a flyer on. Sure, that might be worth it. And then, be prepared to immediately turn around and release it on VOD if your gamble doesn't pay off. But again, you can't do that with Wonder Woman. It's just not realistic.
Well, I'd like the record to show, and I've got plenty of podcasts to back it up, that I've been practicing social distancing at the movie theater for a long time. So I'm not worried about when that kicks back off again.
That is true. Ron just commented and said that Blumhouse is going to be the first out of the gate. I think that's absolutely right. Their production and distribution model is such that they could spin up a movie and get it out quickly. I do want to also shout out, Jeff just pointed out that he and his wife just finally watched Anna and the Apocalypse, which, if you follow me on Twitter, is a movie that that I am constantly banging the drum for. The director actually follows me on Twitter because I'm kind of a big deal. But Anna and the Apocalypse is an absolutely delightful, wonderful movie. It's one of my favorite movies I've seen. He says great recommendation and some of my favorite songs from any movie in a long time. So everybody that's listening or to this, if you haven't seen it, please check it out. It's wonderful.
Excellent. All right, perfect. So, just want to update people that are watching right now, and we appreciate this. I think it's going good so far. Like this is the first time we've tried to live stream. I have to give all the credit in the world to Mike. He's the one that set this up. He's the one that's got, all I had to do was wait for him to Skype phone call me in. So I just want to say, Mike, thank you for getting this all set up. I think this looks great, and it's a great test run we're going through right now. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I thank everybody for showing up too. And if you guys have any feedback, drop them in the chat or reach out to me on Twitter and give me, this is the first time I've ever done a live stream. I ran through a couple different programs trying to do it. And so, if you have any ideas on how to improve it, go ahead and reach out to me and let me know.
Absolutely. So I'd like to point out that we've got, you and I did an episode. We've started a new series, which I'm calling No Fate. I'll look at the Terminator franchise. And we released part 1 on Patreon, but I'm going to release that tonight. I want to just go ahead and make that announcement while we were doing this show. I'd be curious, just for the people that are watching right now, if they have seen Terminator Dark Fate and what their opinion is.
Yeah. Because we'll kind of hold ours back a little bit, obviously, but I would love to hear what everybody thought of it. Just because Terminator movies are, well, they're something.
And I'm asking specifically to Paul Lytle because I haven't talked to him in a little while. Paul, we probably talked movies for 6 hours that night, and I don't think the Terminator discussion came up. And I'd be curious, Paul, what do you think about the movies post Terminator 2? Okay, well, he's already answered. Yep, I've heard so much bad, I've avoided it so far. What are your thoughts on the other films, Paul? So, while we wait for his answer, let's see.
I think if there's... Sorry, go ahead, Dana.
No, I was just going to point out that Carmelita just said that it looks and sounds good, gentlemen. Thank you, Carmelita. I appreciate it. And Carmelita, I want to point out that, I've got some time on my hands. I know Mike's going to have some time on his hands in the evening. We'd love to get you back for another episode of the 20th Century Movie Club. So just when we're done recording here, I'm going to reach out to you and we're going to set up a date.
If I remember correctly, we did bandy about the possibility of doing a fantasy episode with Carmelita, which I think would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and just give a quick movie review because I did watch a movie last night. I made it a point, based on, when I had my friend from Dublin on the day before to talk about how things were going in Ireland, and he gave some Irish film recommendations, and then Adam Risky was on yesterday, and he gave me some recommendations of some films to check out, and so I finally watched Guy Ritchie's new film, The Gentleman. And I have to tell you, being a big fan of Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, Snatch, and Rock and Rolla, I was ready for another type of, British, gangster film done by Guy Ritchie. And it was as advertised, and I really enjoyed the film. I would say that it was a little easier to follow than Snatch. I think Snatch required 2 viewings for me the first time I saw it. This one was a little bit easier to follow, and I really enjoyed it. Mike, have you seen The Gentleman?
I have not actually seen The Gentleman yet. It is on my list, but I haven't gotten around to seeing it. I by and large like Guy Ritchie. I even like the Guy Ritchie movies that people don't like. So I'm sure I'll like The Gentleman. I actually think Man from U.N.C.L.E. is his sort of unsung masterpiece. I think that movie is just absolutely fantastic. But I even liked, I'll beat the drum for King Arthur. I actually enjoyed the hell out of King Arthur, as dumb as that movie was. So I definitely do need to watch The Gentleman. I just haven't gotten around to it yet because I've been... the project I've sort of been working on is after we talked about Godzilla on the episode with Alejandra, I decided I was going to start with the 1954 Godzilla again and work my way through the entire 35 movie series. I've got about 4 left, but it has been delightful. It has been so much fun, but it's been a lot of movies that I'm working my way through.
Excellent. Let me just read some of these ones. So, Exciter 11 just came in and said, watch Lawrence of Arabia for the first time this week. That was one of your
It
recommendations.
was actually Collins, to give
It
credit
was
where
called. Oh,
credit
it was
is
one of
due.
call. Okay, it was recommended on volume 25. That's correct. Um, and let's see here. Did you like Swept Away, Mike?
I did
That's the
not
question
like
specific
Swept
for you.
Away. That is the one, but I almost consider that a Madonna movie more than a Guy Ritchie movie, because he was definitely in his kept man phase at that point, and sort of just doing. I mean, she was clearly the creative impetus behind that movie. There's nothing about that. Say what you will about King Arthur, even Aladdin, they feel like Guy Ritchie movies. There is nothing about Swept Away that felt like a Guy Ritchie movie. That is his one absolute, I think, garbage movie. That one's not good.
And
Um,
see, Exciter 11 said, I thought The Gentleman was all over the place at the beginning. Some folks walked out of the theater. It picked up in the last half. Well, that's interesting. No, that's interesting. Yeah, I was really I enjoyed the narrative. It was a little bit different narrative. It was, I'm not going to spoil it, but sort of Hugh Grant plays a character who basically, kind of tells another character a story of what's going to happen. Basically, it's. I like the way the narrative structure was laid out in that film. It was a little different for a Guy Ritchie film, but I think it fit perfectly with his directing style. Paul Lytle has said that he hated Terminator 3, but he enjoyed Terminator Salvation and was lukewarm on Genesis. I'm going to tell you something about Terminator 3. All right, I remember specifically summer 2003. Now, I think I've told this many times that seeing Terminator 2 in the theater, it was the first R-rated film my dad ever took me to saw. You want to talk about a religious moment. Seeing that movie in the theater as a 12-year or a 13-year-old was absolutely incredible. Having said that, I bought into the hype for Terminator 3, and my friends and I, we had a Terminator party the day that came out. And you mentioned midnight release. We got our tickets. We watched Terminator 1 and 2. We had some beers. We had a great time, and we went to the theater, and we were all really excited. And I sat down, and the movie started, and when it was over, my friends just looked at me, and they just said, "You okay?" And I said, "Let's just go. Let's just leave right now." And I remember there's only like a handful of times where I was just properly disappointed by a film, and that was one of them. So, Paul, I'm going to second what you said about hating Terminator 3.
and that's going to be fun when we get to that episode, because,
Yes,
as you
yes.
know, the Terminator 3 Defender has logged on. I am very pro Terminator 3, probably as pro as anybody you will meet. And I actually love it. I think it's fantastic. So we're going to have a good conversation about that one. Um, Ron, I see your question about VOD. We're going to come back to that because I think that's a great question. I just want to finish kind of talking about Terminator before we come back to that one. But yeah, Salvation for me is the one. Sorry, Paul, I disagree with you on that one. Salvation for me is the one that I just, again, not to spoilers for upcoming episodes, but that's the one that, Dana, I feel like that one, like you felt about Terminator 3. I actually get angry thinking about Salvation.
Well,
Because
what's interesting, well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off
no,
there. What's
you're fine.
interesting
Go ahead.
is there was enough space between Terminator 2 and Terminator 3, and then Terminator 3 and Salvation. There was enough space for me to get excited again, and I remember being very excited. You know what? We might have to stop because we might be showing our hands. For those who don't know, we're doing a whole movie by movie look
Yeah.
at the Terminator franchise right now. So I'll let you finish what you're saying. I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm
No,
sorry
no,
about
you're
that.
fine. That was just because to talk about why I hate it is to get into what we'll talk about, because I will just leave this teaser for upcoming episodes. I think the Terminator series really has a John Connor problem, and I think Salvation is the most emblematic movie of that. But we'll get into that. So there's a little teaser for everybody. Just make sure you listen and when they come out. I think it's a good time to switch to Ron's question. So Ron asked, what was a VOD movie that should have gotten a wide release? I could go on for 100 movies, but I'm going to shout out 3 that came out last year, or 2 years ago at this point. Um, Anna and the Apocalypse, obviously, since I've already talked about it, Revenge, and Mandy all should have been blasted out, and honestly, Upgrade too. All of those were VOD. They got some of them got minor theatrical releases, but they should have been blasted out to 2,000 theaters because all four of those movies are absolutely incredible. And everybody that complains about, oh, all the movies that we get in the theaters now are the same, those four movies are the types of movies that movie fans want to go to the movies for. I mean, they're all just different and fantastic and interesting. So those would be my answers. Dana, how about you?
I'm just going to go based on what I've seen so far, and I'm just going to second what you said about Upgrade. I know that got a limited theatrical release. I didn't see it in the theater. I did see it video on demand. And if you haven't seen Upgrade yet, don't stop right now. But when we're done, watch that movie. It is absolutely phenomenal. It's a hidden gem, kind of like I'll always take an opportunity to champion the 2012 film Dredd. Mm-hmm. When the question came up about film remakes, and if we all remember 1995's Judge Dredd, the Stallone film, if you haven't seen 2012's Dredd, that is a phenomenal movie as well.
It's incredible. Carl Urban's perfect. I'm a big Dredd fan. Judge Dredd was actually one of the things that got me into comics when I was a kid. And I thought that movie was as close to a perfect Dredd film as we could possibly get. So that one's also great. That one did get a wide release. Unfortunately, it was just kind of a disappointment at the box office. But if you like Dredd, certainly Upgrade is a movie that I think you would have affection for. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul says Dredd is so good. Let's see. Carmelita says I'm a sucker for a Terminator film. Mandy, 1,000%. I might be the only one that hasn't seen Mandy yet, so I think it's on the list.
It's again, it's one of those movies that's really kind of a special viewing experience because it's one of those few times when you're watching a movie you can truly say, yeah, I've never seen a movie like this before. Like, I was one person going in and I'm another person coming out because there's so much creativity on display. Not to say that it's like the most life-changing movie, but just the idea of this is a movie that could only be made by these specific people at this specific time. Ron mentioned his pick was The Raid. The Raid actually did get a release here. It got about a 1,200 screen release. I actually saw it in the theater when it came out. It came out the same weekend as Space Jail, aka Lockout, with Guy Pearce. They both came out the same weekend. I had a fun little double feature with those.
Interesting. Let's see. Exciter says Mandy has a soundtrack I'd like to hear in the theater. Keep an open mind. It's corny too. Doesn't take itself seriously at all.
Yeah, it's great. I think you'd really dig it, Dana. So
yeah, listen, and I'm gonna be one of these people. Like, I'm gonna tell you right now. Like, I like Nick Cage video on demand movies. Like, shout out to F This Movie. They did a great episode where they compared VOD Travolta and VOD Cage, and that was a wonderful episode, and I picked up on a couple of movies that they recommended on that one, so I would definitely check that out. So you're a fan of Nick Cage, correct, Mike? We've had this conversation.
Yeah, I absolutely love Cage. And I like him in all capacities. I like crazy over the top Nick Cage. The only Nick Cage I don't like is bored Nick Cage, which occasionally we get. I don't think we get it as much as some people say we do, but we do get bored Nick Cage occasionally.
Sure.
But Carmelita said she wished VFW had a wide release. I would second that as well, Carmelita. VFW is fantastic. I would also recommend Joe Begos's other movie, Bliss. If you liked VFW, check out Bliss, because both of those are great. VFW is an action movie. Bliss is a horror movie, but they both kind of are very similar in tone.
I'm going to shift the conversation just for a moment for the people that are watching. All the rage right now on social media is the Tiger King on Netflix, and I'm just curious about those who are watching if anybody has actually taken the time to watch the show yet. I've seen 1.5 episodes so far, and I don't really know where the plot is going. I think some of the memes that I've seen on social media have kind of spoiled some of it, but if it's going in the direction that I think it's going to go, like this this is one of the most batshit crazy things I've seen in a long time. So, Mike, I think I already asked this earlier. You haven't seen the Tiger King yet,
I
have you?
have I have not watched Tiger King yet. I have been watching a lot of movies and much less TV, so I haven't gotten around to it yet. But I know it's memeified, no question about that. It has gone viral. So hopefully somebody else listening is watched it and can kind of comment on it. But a lot of people that I follow really seem to enjoy it. So Paul just said he's watched the first 3 episodes and it just keeps ramping up.
Oh, now this is interesting. Okay, so Paul said he watched the first 3 episodes and it just keeps ramping up. And it was, let's see, and then he said, I've seen 3 of the episodes, but I knew the case from the last podcast on the left. If I can give a shout out to an amazing podcast, the last podcast on the left is phenomenal, and I'm so excited to hear that they did that case. I can't wait to listen to it. Those guys do an awesome job when they break down, true crime. Exciter11 said, I'm going to start this weekend. Don't Fuck with Cats is another recent one that caught some buzz.
Yeah, and I did not intentionally. I did not watch Don't Fuck with Cats because I actually knew that story beforehand. A shout out to a YouTuber, Rainbot, who does. As some of you can probably imagine, knowing my interests, I'm pretty dialed into like horror YouTube as well. And Rainbot is a great horror YouTuber. She covers dark, weird stuff on the web, and she did a pretty, a deep enough dive on that story before Don't Fuck with Cats came out, and I decided I did not need to. I did not need to watch that documentary at all. I'm sure it's very good. It's just not something that I needed in my brain. Patrick Bromley, who we both know from F This Movie, often says, I don't want that movie or that memory in my head. That's how I feel about Don't Fuck with Cats. I just don't need to see that movie and have that in my head.
That's a movie that I'm familiar with the story as well, and if you want to talk about something that will bother the hell out of me, show me animals in peril like that, and I refuse to watch it because I've been told, don't worry, it doesn't actually show anything, but it's alluded to, and that's already more than I want to know. Like, I don't even want to see it. So, but at the same time, I've heard it's a pretty remarkable story. Like, I've heard the documentary is worth watching, but it's just one that I don't think I could ever bring myself to watch just based on the subject matter. And I do know the actual story as well. So, and it's kind of insane. He said it might have been on Side Stories, but they played a lot of the music in the episode. Is it just me, or is that guy a pretty good singer? Referring to the guy from the Tiger King. when they were playing clips of his music, I'm like, yeah, this guy's not a bad singer. So the Facebook group is a fascinating part of the story. I need to check that out. So I want to ask everybody. I know we've had anywhere from about 10 to 15 people watching tonight, which I think is great because, like I said, we're just getting our feet wet on the streaming thing. But I need to kind of ask, can everybody just kind of mention where they're from right now, and I just give us a quick word on how you're doing in this whole situation that we're going through. I'll start by just saying I'm 40 miles or 50 miles north of Orlando right now, and Orange County is in a lockdown right now. I am not, but I am in self-isolation at my house because my job has temporarily shut down until this is all over with. And I'm doing good. I'm starting to go a little stir crazy, but this is, again, one of the more interesting things because I've been wanting to do live streams for a while, and I always complain about never having the time. I work so much, I never have the time. And one of the first things that Mike and I talked about when we were like, well, we've certainly got some time on our hands. Let's get a live stream going. So, Mike, while we're waiting for other people's answers here, you're in Salt Lake City.
Yep.
What's it like up there right now?
We're not in full lockdown. We're in kind of shelter at home light. Everybody is, all non-essential businesses have basically closed down. Grocery stores, liquor stores, stuff like that are all still open. Some people are still working. I've been working from home for the last couple weeks. Although last week I was still going to court. The courts have now shut down, but last week I was still going to court, even though I was working from home. My wife is working from home 3 days a week and going into the office twice, but she's pretty much the only person in the office when she goes in. We are seeing marked increases in infection rates. We're kind of doubling up every day. And, for those who missed it, we got the fun of an earthquake last week as well. So just to add on to the joy, I know everybody from California was like, well, it's a Tuesday for us, but it's not a Tuesday for us. So it was a new experience. So, but other than that, we're good. We're hanging in there.
Let's see. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it looks like Bobby Morocco is from Sacramento. Paul said he's from Gainesville and still going to work every day.
Let's see. Okay, so this is great. Okay, so it's Spooky CD, Montreal, Quebec, working from home. Spooky, I'll just mention I'm originally from Canada, so I still have some family up there, so I'm closely monitoring what's happening up in Canada, and I do watch Trudeau's daily briefings that he does. Let's see. I'm from Louisville, Kentucky. We're mostly locked down, healthy at home, and I'm working from home. My wife's self-employed. Now she's self-unemployed. I'm not laughing at her, just laughing because of the way you said that.
Sorry to hear that, Ron. I hope
Yes,
you guys are doing okay. Glad you're healthy at home.
Yeah, I'm glad you're healthy at home. It's just it was kind of fun. Now she's self-employed. Let's see. Bobby, I'm still working every day. Mail carrier. All right, awesome. Hey, man, keep up the great work, Bobby. We appreciate what you're doing. Big time. Exciter 11, Southern Ohio, working from home, not near a big city, only a few cases local so far. Carmelita, Alameda, California, and we've been sheltering in place for a week and a half. So, yeah, I mean, we're not in a lockdown here where I'm at, and but I think it's coming. I think it's only a matter of time. Florida is, I think, the third most populous state in America, and I think it's only a matter of time. But mostly everybody I know is just staying at home. I mean, unless they do an essential business or have an essential job. I'd be curious, what are some of the things that people are doing to sort of pass the time? And just before that, Paul said, I'm worried the lockdown is coming. Now, Paul, I know you live in Gainesville. Do you live in Alachua County as well? Because didn't they issue a shelter-in-place order for non-essential workers? Just waiting for his answer on that. Said she gets to file for unemployment now, which will help. We just had a huge uptick in cases here this week. My job, they shut down and they laid off the entire staff, including myself. I actually helped to write my own termination letter, which was kind of a surreal experience. And I filed for unemployment on Saturday, and tomorrow will be 7 days since I filed, and I still haven't even found out whether or not my claim has been approved. Because in Florida, there's so much hospitality service industry in Florida because of all the tourist attractions, and I mean, I can't even wrap my head around how many people have, I hate to use the term lost their jobs, because most of us are going to be rehired whenever the lockdown is lifted. But it's really scary. Oh, Roy, welcome to the conversation, Roy. He was saying earlier he was having a problem getting into the chat. Mike, up in Salt Lake City, restaurants, have they gone to a takeout only model?
Yep, bars are all closed. Restaurants have gone to a takeout or delivery only model. We're as close to shelter at home as you can be without actually having a formal shelter at home order. And so that's kind of where we all are. I'm lucky enough, knock on wood, that since I work for the government, I am still employed. I'm still working from home. So that's good. And luckily, thus far, it appears that people haven't stopped committing crimes in this shelter at home. So it looks like I've still got work to do. So I'm lucky in that regard, I guess. It's tough for a lot of people.
I'd be curious for anyone that's watching right now that's in my situation that has no no firm schedule or no routines or anything. Is anyone experiencing situations where you're just waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning and just starting your day? Because that's happening to me. Like on Tuesday, I woke up at 3 in the morning. And it's not like I woke up and like went back to sleep. I woke up and I made my coffee and I sat outside for 4 hours, and it was just a kind of a weird situation. And I don't know when this is going to end. And I'm so thankful that I'm able to communicate with everybody, and I'm so thankful we got to do this live stream, and I'm trying to do as much podcasting as I can, because the reality of like this could go on for a little bit is really starting to hit me. So I'm glad that I have at least a creative outlet that doesn't require me to have to leave the house. So I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, and agreed here. And I've noticed that kind of seems to be what a lot of podcasters are doing, is recording more podcasts and doing more live streams and stuff, because we've all got the time and we all need the outlet, whether it's people listening to us or us creating the podcasts. It's something that we all need to do just to make sure that we don't, we kind of keep ourselves all together. To switch gears a little bit here, and all of you please feel free to drop into the chat how you're doing and where you're at and stuff like that. But Exciter11 asks, Dana, how'd you get introduced to John for the podcast?
That's a great question. I love telling this story. Thank you for asking. So we got to go back to, I think it was April of 2019. Really great friend of the show, Jim Hemphill, and I do a little mini series on the podcast called Icons, which is a look at, we just kind of mutually agree that, yeah, we love Wes Craven, or we love Oliver Stone, or we love Quentin Tarantino. Let's do an episode devoted to their careers, and let's just have a discussion. And Jim he has an encyclopedic knowledge of all things film, and he's just one of the smartest guys I know. And he works in the industry, and he's somebody I always will lean on or turn to if I've got a question, an in-depth question that I can't figure out the answer for. So after we did a few episodes on, like I said, Tarantino and Wes Craven, we both mutually agreed that we need to do one on John Travolta, because, I'm 41 years old. I was born in 1978. And so I wasn't really around when he was arguably, as Jim would put it, one of the biggest movie stars in the world. He liked to say that in that time period, you had Clint Eastwood, Burt Reynolds, and John Travolta, and they were the biggest movie stars in the world. So, we decided to do an episode of Icons on Travolta, and we didn't change the format. We kept it the same and released it and got some great feedback. And I want to point out that we were both very, very positive on his career. And even over the past few years, when he's been doing a lot of films that have gone just to video on demand, a lot of times those films haven't been the most well received, but the argument can always be made that he always gives it 100%. And that was sort of the case we made for, the latter part of his career. So I want you to flash forward to August of 2019. I'm sitting at the restaurant that I work at. It's 11 o'clock at night. We're just finishing up, and I'm there with a friend of mine, and I get a phone call from a buddy of mine who works at another restaurant here in town. Now, John has a home kind of close, just on the outskirts of where I live. Now, that's one of many houses that he has. He's got a house in Maine and L.A. and who else? Who God knows who else. He's got homes everywhere. But every once in a while, he would pop into a few local restaurants. And my friend called me and he said, Dana, he goes, I'm not sure how to explain this to you other than to say that, some of John Travolta's people came into the restaurant and they were looking for you, because apparently John had heard that episode that you did on his career and he wants your phone number. And so I was just like, well, did you give it to him? And so I remember just being like, oh my God, I like John Travolta's going to call me? And I stayed up till like 4 a.m. and I never got the call. So the next day, I'm back at the restaurant because the restaurant's owned by a couple friends of mine. It's closed on Sundays. They let me use it to record podcasts when I'm going to have multiple people on the show. And so we're set up in the restaurant, and I get a phone call around 5:30 that evening, and it's from a number I don't recognize. And I answer it, and I think it's going to be John, but it's not. It was a guy by the name of Ron, and it was John's assistant. And he goes, "Dana, this is Ron." I said, "How you doing, Ron?" He said, "Well, not doing too well. We're trying to get John on one of his airplanes, but he's refusing to leave until you answer him back." And I said, "Well, I don't have anything to answer back to." And you hear Ron kind of look at his phone, and you just kind of hear him mumble, "Oh shit, I gave him the wrong number. Hold on a second." And then, 2 minutes later, John starts texting me, and we kind of kept up the text communication for a couple hours. And about 3 days later, I said to myself, well, what the hell? All he can say is no. And I just sent him this long text about, hey, I know you've got a really busy schedule, but I was thinking maybe the next time you're in town, if you want, maybe you want to come on my show and we could discuss your career a little bit more in depth. And I sent it, and I was like, oh, I don't know, what are you going to say? 30 seconds later, he texted me back, said, "I'd love to. I'm not going to be here for the rest of the month, but come September, I'll get in touch with you and we'll make it happen." And so, a couple days into September, I get a text from him. "Okay, I can do this date. Is this going to work for you?" I said, "Yeah." We had no parameters. Like we just set up the location where we were going to record. The day of the recording, I get a text from John, and it says, "How late can you record?" And I text back and said, "You tell me." He goes, "Are you good for 1 o'clock in the morning?" "Oh, okay, no problem." And then I text back and said, "Is there any food or specialty beverages or anything?" I'm thinking, this guy's used to going on, talk shows, and there's green rooms, and I'm like, I got to roll out the red carpet for this guy. And he just texts back and he said, "No, just just need some bottled water, maybe some unsweetened iced tea. I'll be good." And I didn't know if I was going to get 10 minutes with him. I didn't know if I was going to get 20 minutes. He shows up. Turns out we were dressed identical. Both of us were wearing black V-neck T-shirts, and I just thought that was ironic when I opened the door. And he came in, and you just have that moment when a face is super recognizable. It was just very surreal, because here he is. It's John Travolta. And so we went to the little recording studio, and I said, "Are you good?" He said, "Yeah." And so we hit record, and I released that episode in 2 parts. But it was all just one recording. I just released it in 2 parts. And we recorded for close to 2 hours. And the only reason why we didn't record longer was because I ran out of gas. Because I wasn't used to being up at 3:30 in the morning. And it was cool. When we were done recording, I'm packing up the equipment, and him and I are just talking. We ended up talking for another hour. And, we still keep in touch with those. We still keep in touch with each other. I texted him the other day. I said, "I hope hope you and your family are doing safe." He got right back to me. He said, "You too, Dana." And I'm going to have him back on the show. And that was, again, if you would have told me 6 years ago when I first started the podcast that, I'd have arguably one of the biggest movie stars in the world on my show, I probably wouldn't have believed it. But that's exactly what happened. And I'm grateful that I had an opportunity to sit down and talk with him, and he was, as advertised, the nicest guy in the world. And I'll tell you this real quickly. When we were done recording, I had turned the recorder off. I asked him. I said, "John," I said, "can I get a couple pictures with you so I can put it up on for social media promoting?" And he just said, "Dana, from this point on, when it comes to you and me, you write your own ticket." He goes, "I'm so grateful and I appreciate, you understanding my career like no one else I've ever met. You and Jim, you guys completely understood my career. Whatever I can do to help you, I'm happy to help, happy to oblige." And that was, again, just a surreal moment. I'm sorry, that was a very long-winded answer to a quick question. What do we hear? Travolta killed it in American Crime Story. Yeah, the OJ one, absolutely. Carmelita said that Icons episode is one of my favorites. Thank you. And then those Travolta episodes are great. I wish my dad could have heard it. He was a massive Travolta fan. Yeah, that's awesome. This Exciter one said, I bet I can't believe how he is so nocturnal. No, I mean, that's what he told me. He said that just flip the switch for everyone else. If he is, if we get up at 7 o'clock in the morning, he's going to bed at 7 p.m. Just flip the switch. Thank you, Paul. Paul said such a great story. Yeah, thank you, Paul. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, it was kind of a surreal. That whole day was surreal. And I'll tell you one more quick little note about that. I had been talking with Peter Facinelli. For those who don't know Peter Facinelli, he was in the Twilight movies. He was on the show Nurse Jackie. Great actor, great guy. And I had been talking with him and texting with him about him coming on the show. And all the while this was happening in September, I threw a bunch of dates out. And I said, how about Monday, September 23rd? He's like, great. How about that date? I'm like, perfect. Let's set it up. And so I'm super excited. I start texting, some friends. I got Peter Facinelli coming on. They're like, great. When? I'm like, Monday the 23rd. They're like, isn't that the same day you've got Travolta coming on? I was, oh, fuck. Whoops. And so I actually, if you go back and listen to that Peter Facinelli interview, that happened 4 hours before the John Travolta interview happened. So if I wasn't adding enough pressure on myself, I had another, great actor coming on my show. So I think I've been able to demonstrate that I work really well under pressure. So, okay, Mike, I'm sorry. I just was rambling.
No, you're
there for a
good.
while.
This is a great story. You are, look, man, I'm just along for the ride. When it comes to you telling stories, I'm just along for the ride. I'm a fan like everybody else. I did want to, Ron had thrown out a question a little bit ago about watching The Stepfather and being surprised by Terry O'Quinn's penis in that movie, and wanted to know if anything had surprised us in a movie like that. Ron, I'm just going to say Sleepaway Camp. Sleepaway Camp is all that needs to be said. And that will always be the answer to that question.
I would say Bruce Willis, Color of Night, the unrated version. You can't unsee that. So I'll leave it at that. Someday, if you guys want, I'll tell you about my LA trip, which for those who don't know, I went out to Los Angeles for 4 days, and I was there really before this whole COVID-19 thing really broke out in the United States. I can say that if I had waited a week later for going to Los Angeles, I wouldn't have had the same experience, but I really had an interesting time there. Let's see. Great answers to both horrifying in different ways. Yeah, absolutely. So, excellent.
Well,
perfect.
Dana, we've been doing this for about an hour. I don't know, and we didn't really talk about a time frame for this, but what are you thinking? Do we want to keep going, or should we call it good for our trial run here?
I don't know. People that are watching, what do you think? How'd it go? First time doing this. Okay. Got to log off now. That was awesome. Have a good night. Carmelita, thank you.
Thank you, Carmelita. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, no, we can wrap this up, and we'll go ahead and plan to do this one again very soon. I mean, I know we've all got some time on our hands, so I think this was a really good trial run, and I want to just take a moment and say, to all of you that have been consistently watching for the past 66 minutes that we've been doing this, thank you so much. We're definitely grateful that you took the time to watch, and we'll keep you in the loop, and we're open to suggestions. If this was if the time at 8 p.m. Eastern time was a good time, or if we should do it a little earlier, a little later, we'd love to hear that feedback.
Absolutely.
Bobby says, keep going.
If there's anything else you guys want us, the Q&A was fun because mostly that was just an opportunity we didn't have to do. But if there's something else that you guys would like to see us do, like maybe talk about a specific movie or something like that, we can absolutely, we'll absolutely do something like that as well. We're just starting to experiment with this whole YouTube component, but I think given the feedback we're getting from everybody, and Jeff just said, awesome job, guys. Thanks, buddy. Ron said, great for the first time. Couldn't tell. Everybody that's thanking us, you're great. Ron wants a theater horror stories episode. I think that would actually be a good one for us to do. We could rehash some of your old ones. I could tell some of mine. I think that would be fun.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'm going to make a deal with everybody. Okay, so Bobby, thank you. Said thank you for all the episodes you just put out. No, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm happy to try to get us out as many as possible. Angie says, you guys are awesome. Always love hearing your stories, insights. Thanks, babe. And let's see. Paul says, see Knives Out. Ron says, I've sent Dana some of my best ones already. Absolutely. Exciter says, love the 20th Century Movie Club and other series. I'll make a deal with everybody. Tune in for the next live stream. I keep teasing this next movie theater rant, but I think what I will do is, instead of recording it as an episode, I will do it I'll tell that story on our next live stream, because it takes a little time. It involves me going to a baseball game and then going to a theater afterwards. And when I say that the could only happen to Dana scenarios played out, that was 100% the case at both the baseball game and the movie theater that day. So we'll just leave it at that. So listen, guys, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah,
this was so much fun.
Thank you, everybody. This was a trial run, and it was a blast. It was an absolutely wonderful time. So I think we will log off, and everybody have a good night, good weekend. Stay safe out there, and take care of yourselves.